functions, and I'll be talking about the VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, and how we can use the index and match functions, which is one of the most powerful functions that we can use in Excel. So today's topics are very short, but they are very important in terms of handling data when there are certain condition associated with your data set. So to start with, the first function that I'm going to discuss is about the if error function. Now, if error function, for this, let me take you to a option over here. So for if error function, what we can do, we can write, first we need to understand the VLOOKUP concept. For example, a VLOOKUP function stands for vertical lookup. So let's get a scenario. Over here I want to populate the first name, last name, and the department and the salary rate by considering on the basis of the employee ID that is available over here. Now if we take the main table over here, this is the main table where all the data in terms of the first, last name, and department email ID has been updated over here. So this is the master table, and what I want to apply a VLOOKUP function on this particular table, and I want to fetch the name against these IDs. So VLOOKUP function has certain arguments. VLOOKUP function stands for vertical lookup. So we'll look over here, we'll look for this particular values in this particular table on the basis of the employee ID. What we can do, we can start writing this particular formula with an equal to sign, and we'll be using the VLOOKUP function where the definition states that it looks for the value in the leftmost column of the table. So the lookup value is this one. So this particular value is in the left hand side of the table. So it starts scanning the table from the left hand side. So table, and then returns the value in the same row from a column you specified. Now this definition might be a bit confusing, or sometimes the description may not be so clear enough unless and until we apply it practically. So the scenario over here is that I want to fetch the first name, last name, the department name, and the salary rate in terms of the employee ID that we have. So I will be using a VLOOKUP formula, and the lookup value for this particular formula, it takes arguments like, so the VLOOKUP function has the following arguments: the lookup value, table array, column index number, and the range lookup. Now the best practices that we can follow while working with function arguments in Excel is by using the input function option. This is an insert function option. You can see over here there's an F and X. The function symbol is over here. You can click on this particular option, and whenever you are working with any particular function, all the arguments related to that function will be available over here. Now you can individually select all the text box over here, or the input box over here in the argument, and you can select the value from the respective tables or the location in your data set. The first value is lookup value. The lookup value will be selecting this one because on the basis of this value we are looking for the first name, last name, and department name. The second argument is a table array. This table array is the table from where we are fetching this particular data. So over here this particular table is this employee list table. So we can select the whole table. We can use the shortcut option from a keyboard like the Control plus Shift downward arrow for selecting the columns for the rows, and the right arrow for selecting the columns. So whole table we have selected. The next argument is a column index number. Now this particular column, first name, I have to find the number position of this column. So if I come over here, the position of the first name is 3. So we'll write 3 over here. And the range lookup argument takes true or false. True for closest matching or false for the exact matching. So it's a logical value that we use to find the exact match or the logic or the closest match that we can have for that particular value for which we are looking. So over here we have the data in that particular master table, right? So we can use a exact match option. So we'll use a false value. Now you can see all the arguments have been properly fitted up. One thing what we can do, we can make this particular range a fixed range, so table range that we have selected. So in order to do that, make this particular range as a fixed value, what you can do, you can select this particular range. This particular range is nothing but the whole table range starting from A1 to the I column 38 row. So I38 is the last cell over here. So this is the whole table that has been selected, and you can press F4 from your system from a keyboard, and you can make this particular range as a fixed range. And now if I click OK, I have got the first name against this particular employee ID. I can drag this over here and I will get all the names against each of the employee ID that we have over here. Now to verify this particular lookup function that we have performed over here, what we can do, we can randomly check any employee ID. For example, if I check 1056, so if I come over here and if I check 1056, I have the first name as Joe over here. So we have Joe against 1056. Similarly, we can do the same thing for the last name. So once more we can have a walkthrough of the VLOOKUP function. So we'll write VLOOKUP. We'll go to this particular insert function option just beside the formula bar. We click on it and we can see all the 4 arguments that is considered under the VLOOKUP function. For the lookup value, we'll again select the employee ID. For the table array, we can go to the master table and we can select the whole table, and we can fix the range by pressing F4. Now F4 can be used in a different system. It can be different options like an Alt plus F4 button. We can then we can use a F4 or a function plus F4. So in my system I need to simply press F4, and you can see some $sign associated with this particular range. A $sign means this value is now a fixed value. Coming to the column index number, what we can do, we can go and see that position of this particular last name column in this particular master list. Now the position of this particular column is 2, so we can write 2 over here. So you have to count it from the left, so 1 2, so we can put 2 over here, and as we are looking for an exact match, we'll write false, and you can press OK, and we have got the last name over here. Similarly, we can do the same thing for the other 2 columns. So let us quickly write the formula over here. So now by now I'm sure that by writing 2 formulas simultaneously in one after the other in the 2 columns, now you can freely write the formula. So this is how you get practice to a particular writing formulas in Excel. So you have to write you have to practice each of the formula. So there's a way that I used to follow, that the first 3 times I used to copy as it is, writing the formula from any sample data, and then for the next 5 times I used to try to write it without going back to the formula and saying it, and then next time I used to go for search for similar scenario, and without even referring the formula once, I used to figure out the scenario and then I used to implement. So this is initially this will take some time, but if you follow these particular steps, so initially you start copying the formula, you look and type it, and then you don't refer the formula, and then you don't refer the scenario also. So you get the scenario, you implement the formula. So by this way you will find a proper structured approach to work on any business scenario where you have to implement any advanced level Excel formula. Okay, coming back to the example, so I will write the formula. So the lookup value, again I will be looking for employee ID, comma, and table array. So I'll go back to the table over here, I will select it, comma, column index, I can write over here department, right? So it stands for 4, comma, and I'll select the exact match from over here. I will close the bracket, I will select the range over here, I'll make it fixed, and I'll press enter, and I've got the department table over here. And then I will write quickly for this lookup value 7 comma table error. I'll go back to the table over here. I'll select the table, I'll give a comma. So this is one of the way of writing the formula. And coming back to the table, I'm looking for the salary rate, right? Salary rate over here is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9th. It's a 9th column from here. Comma, I'll write false for the exact match, close the bracket, make the employee range as a fixed. I'll select this range, press F4, enter, I'm done. So this is how we can use the VLOOKUP formula. Now one important thing that I want you guys to focus over here. For every column we have a section over here where there is no data. So there's some error, that is hash n by a error. So this is a very common type of error we can find in Excel. Now what if I want to replace this error with a message? I want to have a short message over here like no data or no employee ID kind of message. I want to update this particular table with a, so whenever any user come to this particular, instead of showing this NA message, I can choose to show him a different message over here like no data or no employee ID. So how can I do that? So for this particular scenario, we'll be using a conditional function, that is if error. Now if I type over here if error, it returns a value if error, if an expression is an error and the value of the expression itself otherwise. Again, don't go by the definition if it's get confusing. It's nothing else but you can show an error, you can represent an error from a data set through any particular message, or you can itself show the error through this particular function. Now let's see how to implement this function. Implementation is very important. So what I can do, I have already an existing function on each of the cell over here, that is the VLOOKUP function, correct? So we have a VLOOKUP function over here. Now what I want, I will use the if error over here. Just click before the function name if error, and now the moment I select if error, there is a bracket, opening bracket that will be created. Now keep this particular function VLOOKUP within this bracket and keep a comma over here. Within the double quotes you can write over here no employee ID, and you can close this and you can close the bracket. Now you can press enter. Now if you can drag this particular formula to the other shelf, you can see there's a no employee ID message that has been displayed over here. So instead of hash NA, you can display a small message or a small instructions telling the end user that there is no data over here. The same thing we can do for over here for the other columns. So if I can write if error, comma, and within double quotes we can write no employee ID, and we can the same thing I can do it from over here. If error, within double quotes no employee ID, and I can drag it over here. So this is one of the conditional functions that we can use in our data set to represent any error message. The next function that I'm going to work with is a HLOOKUP. Now for this I have a different set of sample data where I want to fetch the stock information for product 2. So over here the product code is product 2, for which I want to fetch the stock information against these stock house. Now this is the master product. Over here the product 2 has a information in terms of the different numbers of product available in the warehouse. What I want to implement an HLOOKUP, that is an horizontal lookup. Now let's see how we can implement that. What I can do, the format is same, the formula is also same, but the way it looks is a horizontal way. So it takes the row into consideration in terms of column. So what I can do, I do HLOOKUP, and the lookup value over here will be product code, and the table array, you can see the same arguments over here. So I can go to this insert function and I can get the same arguments. The table array will be this whole table. Now in place of row index number, what we have to do, you have to come to this particular option and I have to give the row number over here. Now for this particular scenario, product 2 is row 1. So stockhouse A is in the next row, so that will be 2. And the range lookup we can give it as false, as we are looking for an exact match. And we can press enter and we can see there's a 150 over here. If you can check the value, yes, it's 150. The same thing we can do for the other two stockhouse details. So we can write HLOOKUP. Lookup value will be again this particular product 2. We'll keep a comma and I'll be selecting this particular table, comma 3 for the next row, and we can close the parenthesis, press enter, and we have got the next value. The same thing what we can do for the third option. So write an HLOOKUP, table array for exact value, close the bracket, press enter. Now writing an HLOOKUP or a VLOOKUP formula for each of the columns. So I have written two lookup formulas in front of you, the VLOOKUP and the HLOOKUP. Now writing an HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP formula for each of the column or row, it's a cumbersome process, right? Every time you have to select in each row, you have to write the HLOOKUP whole arguments, and for the VLOOKUP also whole argument. What if I want to avoid these steps? I don't want to write a formula for each of the rows. Even in the VLOOKUP, I don't want to write a VLOOKUP formula for each of the column and I have to drag it. What if I want to avoid this particular step? I just want to write the formula once and I can drag for all the columns and rows. And I want to avoid this particular steps of writing repeated VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP formula. Now considering this particular sample data, if I delete this particular table and I just want to write a single formula over here, and I want to use this formula by dragging to the rest of the column table, and all the data in terms of the first name, last name, department and salary shall be easily populated over here. The question is how I can do that. So we have two formulas for that, index and match. The index works on the reference of a table and match works on the value of a table data. So index will always work on the two different functions have a different role to play. Now let's see how we can use these two functions and populate all the data by writing the functions only one. I don't have to write the VLOOKUP for every column. So we can start it by the index option. So we'll write equal to, and I will select the index. Now let me click on this particular insert function. I want every one of you to please focus and see how this index function is powerful, how much this index and match function is powerful enough so that you can avoid writing a formula, VLOOKUP formula or HLOOKUP formula for every cell or every column or every row. So I'll click on this. Now this particular index function takes two arguments. The argument are in terms of array and reference. So I will select the first argument as an array and click on OK. Now in this particular array, I will take the master table. So over here, I'll go and select the master table. And what I can do, I can fix this master table range by pressing F4. Now the other two arguments are in terms of rows and column. So let's work on the row argument. Over here I will use a match function. And if I click on this particular match function, this function has a 3 arguments. So I'm using a function within a function. So this is a match function which have 3 arguments: lookup value, lookup array, and the match type. So I will take the lookup value as let me write it again, index array. Over array I should go to the employee table and I'll select this table. I'll make this particular range as fixed. I go to the next argument. I'll type the match function. I'll go to this match function. I'll just click before the match function and I will say the lookup value over here. So I'll take this B3, the first employee ID, and I will make it fix. The lookup array will be over here, this particular rows, the first column, and I will fix this particular column again with an F4 function and a match type. Now this match type is also like a logical number of value where 0 means an exact match and 1 means an almost same match kind of option. So we'll take 0 over here, and again, so I have given all the 3 arguments for the match function in the row argument. Now again I will click on the index function and I will come to the row column number, the next argument for index. So we are working on the index function argument. The first argument I have given by selecting the array, that is the table range. The second argument I have fulfilled by using the match function. The third argument, column number, will also be taken care by the match function. So over here I will write again match, will open a bracket, and I can see the match function again over here. I'll select this particular function. I'll just click before that particular function, and for the lookup value this time I will select C2 and I will make this particular cell as fixed. The lookup array, I'll go back to the employee table and I'll select the column headers starting from A1 to I1 and I will make this also fixed, and the match type will again, I'll keep it to 0. Now I will again go back to the index function. I'll close the bracket and I'll click OK. Now see the magic. So this is where the things will taken care by the index and match. I have written just only a single function for this particular cell. Now what I will do, I will drag this function to all the cells. You can see that all the values are getting extracted in terms of rows and column. Now I will again drag this particular function over here, and you can see all the data has been populated. I don't have to write the VLOOKUP option again and again. So that is the importance of using a index and match function. So we can again have a look of this particular function. So this particular index function takes 3 arguments: array, row number, column number. What I have done for the array argument, I have selected this particular employee table, the whole table from which I am fetching the data. Now for the second argument, that is row number, I have used a match function. Now if I click on this particular function, before this function, this match function takes 3 arguments. I have given the lookup value, the lookup array, and the match type. And again I will click just before this index function, and I will come back to over here, and I have given the column function then, where I have used a match function. Let me change this as actually. So this is how we can avoid writing VLOOKUP functions. Now the next example that I'm going to talk about is the same thing I want to apply over here. So instead of writing the HLOOKUP function for each of the cell, I can use a similar option for this particular sample data also. So how can I do that? We can use again a match function over here. How can you use a match function over here? What we can do, just a minute guys. So we have an HLOOKUP function over here already. Now what we can do, we can just modify this particular function. Now what I can do, I can remove this HLOOKUP, and instead of writing the HLOOKUP for each of the row, what you can do, I can write HLOOKUP, and I can go to this particular input function, and the lookup value will be this pro2 which I have selected, this particular product 2. Let me make this particular as a fixed value. The table array I'll be working with is this particular table array. Again I will make this particular table array as fixed, the table range that I'm selecting. Now when I'm coming to the row index where I was using the row number 2, 3, what I can do, I can use a function called match again. And within this function, what I'll be using another function called left. Now this left, what it does, it will take the length of the expression. I want to calculate the length of this each of the stockhouse expressions over here. So I'll select the A5 over here, and the number of characters I have to feed over here. So the number of characters over here in the stockhouse B or AAC is 14. And then again I will go back to the match function, and for the lookup array I'll go to stock list, and I will select this particular row, and I will make it fixed, and match type I will keep it 0 as before. And again I will go back to the HLOOKUP, and for the range lookup I will give it false. Now let us understand this particular function, what I have done. Earlier what I did, now let me first implement this particular and then we can explain it. Now you can see I've got 150. If I drag this particular value, I will get all the values for the subsequent rows. So I don't have to write the HLOOKUP function again and again. Now let us understand this particular function. So I was working on the HLOOKUP argument. The first argument, what? This is the lookup value, which I have selected the pro to just like before I did. I only fixed that particular value. Second is table array. So I selected the table array just as I did for the previous example for the lookup function. Now for the third argument, row index number, what I did, instead of giving the row number, I have used two functions, the match and the left. Under the match function argument, I have used the left function to fetch this particular length of this particular expression so that I can fetch the value against that particular expression. And that value is available under this particular range. And so I have, instead of the row number, I have given this particular function over here, and the rest of the things I have kept same, and I applied this particular formula. And this is how I got all the HLOOKUP values without even writing a different HLOOKUP formula for each of the rows. Now these things at the initial stage will look a bit confusing for you guys. What you can do after this particular session, you can just review this particular video and you can stop and you can understand the formula. These are very powerful formulas which we can use under the Advanced Excel option. So these formulas are a bit complicated, however, but you can use these particular formulas in solving large amount of data, large sets of data where you have to work on various scenarios of fetching the data against a particular conditions over here, just like I have done in terms of the employee ID. You can also use the if error conditions to remove this kind of errors, and you can just prevent the end user to see this kind of errors within your data set. So this was all I wanted to discuss today. So as I decided to discuss this particular simple formulas which looks a bit complicated, but they are very helpful in terms of, they are very dynamic in terms of solving certain business scenarios. So I hope this particular part of the discussion was helpful to you. I will request you guys to please explore this area as much as possible and try to use this kind of concepts or formulas in a different business scenario that you come across. I will continue to come up with this kind of functions, and I will try to discuss it on my sessions on a regular basis, so that at the end of this particular discussions you will get handy with some good and strong and dynamic functions of Advanced Excel. I hope I was able to clear the examples. However, you can just refer to this particular video after this particular session. Let's meet tomorrow with some new topics in terms of Advanced Excel. That's all for today.